started as after it clicks past 7 o'clock. There's 7 o'clock. We'll wait for the being recorded.
This conference will now be recorded.
There we go. Just about the time that we get this virtual meeting business down pat, we won't be doing virtual meetings anymore. Welcome everyone to our first in many years joint meeting of the City Council, the County Board of Supervisors, and the Muscatine School Board. I'm so pleased that we're able to get together like this, and I hope this is just the first of many to come down the road. First of all, we need to make sure that everybody's here and do a roll call. So I would ask each entity to do that one at a time. So why don't we start with the County Board of Supervisors? Nancy, are you doing that for them? Or Santos, do you want to do it?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Jeff Sorensen.
Here.
Nathan Mather.
Here.
Doug Holliday.
Here.
Scott Howard.
Here.
And your Honor, Santos Acedo is here as well.
Very
We're all
good.
present.
Thank you. Thank you. Tammy, do you want to do the roll call for the school board?
I will
Or
ask that our
Lisa?
board secretary do that for us, please.
Perfect.
Sure. My pleasure. Director Cooney?
Here.
Levy?
Here.
Braba?
Here.
Finn?
Here.
McCarter?
Here.
Morgan?
Here.
And Sure.
Here.
All members of my board are present. Thank you.
Thank you. Cinda, will you please do the roll call for the city council?
Councilmember Hopkins,
Present.
Councilmember Freilich, Councilmember Freilich,
He waved.
okay.
Present.
Councilmember Malcolm, Councilmember Gordon,
Present.
Councilmember Brockert,
Present.
Councilmember Gendrich,
Present.
Councilmember Brackett,
Present.
and did Malcolm show up? Looks like we have 6 present, 1 absent, Your Honor.
Thank
He
you.
may be having issues because I know he was planning to attend. I spoke to him earlier about it.
Okay,
Very good. Well, thank you all. We appreciate you coming tonight. We do have 3 topics on our agenda for this evening, but before we get to that, I would like to thank Lisa, Nancy, and Carol for sitting down and putting together the agenda and getting all of the things needed and done to or the required things done so that we could have this meeting tonight. And extra thanks to Kevin Jennison with the city for doing all the technology on our behalf. So thank you all. We're going to go ahead and get started right away. Our first order of business is we're going to have an overview of igniting community vitality through housing by the City of Muscatine's Housing Department Director, Jody Royal Goodwin. Jody, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much, Jody. Please continue.
Okay. Good evening, council members, supervisors, and trustees. I'm Jody Royal Goodwin. I'm the city's community development director. And tonight I'm here to present on the Ignite Vitality through Workforce Housing. And I wanted to say that this was developed in collaboration with a small group of people, including Supervisor Salcidos, Sorensen, as well as Clint, Rich Dwyer from Kent, and Charlotte Schaefer from the Community Foundation. And I'm sure, and I would welcome any of them to jump on and add when they feel like I have misrepresented or not said everything that needs to be said on a topic. But I'm going to start with a little background as you know, last week, or as you may know, last week we had a presentation and event where Director Durham and Michael Gould came down from IEDA and IFA, and so I'm going to apologize in advance if this seems redundant to a few of you, because many of you were there. And tonight we're looking for a few questions to be answered before, so we can move forward. This is provide an overview for action actually at your individual meetings. We'll come back and make that request specifically. Kevin, can you go to the next slide? So the questions we're looking to have answered tonight are, do the governing bodies actually support the plan that you've got a copy of? So we're just going to do an overview of, and then will each governing body consider adopting a resolution supporting the plan? And do the governing bodies have any feedback on what strategies they may be wanting to include in a resolution or other type of action when we come back with that? And so the next slide, Kevin. So I'm going to confess that I stole this slide from Debbie Durham, but I think it really does give a good overview of the condition of housing in Iowa as a whole. And this is so that we know we're not unique, but we do need to address it for our continued economic growth and benefit of our communities. So the next slide. So as long as I've been in the community, which is almost 6 years now, there's been discussion about housing and how housing is an issue. Employers aren't able to retain workers or recruit workers. Individuals that can't find a house, housing costs too much. And especially when they say, I don't get enough house or the kind of house that I want for what I have to pay. And the next slide, but this just isn't in Muscatine. Just keep that in mind. This plan is a county plan. So there was some data collection, and not just by the city. We at the city did the housing market demand study, which was in September of 2017. The city of Wilton actually did a crossroads of growth for housing and needs and solutions in Wilton, and that was completed in November of 2017. And I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes with this one, because it has a naughty word in it. The city of West Liberty actually had an annexation study completed in 2017 as well. And I include that not because I'm suggesting anything about annexation, but more so because that was one area that they had actually addressed housing needs as was the impetus for that study at all. So, so those three studies found some commonalities, more commonalities actually than differences between the communities. As you can see, we all have aging housing stock. There's a lack, everybody identified a lack of diversity in the housing stock that we do have. Rehabilitation costs were identified as being high, which I think any of us who own a home know. The number of residents are actually, we all share a high rate of cost burden. And then the for sale market is tight. And let's just be honest, since 2017, it's gotten tighter. None of us have a whole lot of construction going on. We have limited opportunities for that construction, as in locations. And then we also all suffer from easy commutes. It's not hard to get here from a lot of other places that are within a reasonable drive to go to work. So, but some of the differences, we have the median value of homes is not hugely different when you look at the numbers, but there's a 10% variation between the city of Muscatine and the county of Muscatine. Our home ownership rates are about 10%. There's a 10% range as well. And then typical condition of homes, if you compare Wilton homes to inner city Muscatine homes, there's a bit of difference. The median rents are substantially different as well. And again, the cost burdens, while we all share cost burden, the rate of that cost burden on the proportion of our population is different. And then the average house size actually varies. And that's important because it gets to the need, the growth when you experience population growth. So go to the next slide, Kevin. So this is just an overview of those conditions, so you can actually see how the different communities compare. So one of the big differences actually is the average household size. In Wilton, it's only 2.3 persons per household. In West Liberty, it's 3.6. And City of Muscatine are kind of in the middle there with around 2.5. And I have actually updated some of this information. So if you were looking at the 2017 study, I went ahead where there was new information available, like through ACS, I actually updated that. So the median home value is updated for each community. Like for Muscatine in the 2017 study, it was 108,000. And as you can see, it went up slightly. The populations are the population estimates of 2019. Household sizes are number of households are 2019. And rents are current rents to what we know of. Home ownership rates are fairly current. The median household income is pretty current. As you'll note, in the median year built, we're all right around the 1960s, with Wilton having more newer construction. So it has a more recent median built date. The Muscatine County median year built actually has isn't about, because I'm not going to trust my math in terms of figuring out. And all I had was categories of 10 years to go on. So it's, when I did the math, it kind of looked at about 1964. The percent of cost burden, this is important because cost burden means anybody who's paying more than 30% of their income towards rent and utilities. So you could make $100,000 a year and you could still be cost burden. It's not typical, but it is a possibility. New homes built, I wasn't able to get that same range from 2010 to 2017 for West Liberty, but I do know that Joe from We Lead told me that they've only had 2 built in the last 2 years, so not a real high rate. And then in addition, the rate for Muscatine and Muscatine County, that was split about 50% single family units and 50% multifamily units. I included the free lunch participation for our schools, primarily because that if you have food insecurity, you're oftentimes, more often than not, suffering from housing instability as well. That also gets us to one of the measurement goals that we have actually identified in the housing plan. And then a big one that was really kind of, I think, a trigger for the entire conversation is that we have every community has a significant number of people who are commuting into work. So they live in Davenport or Bettendorf, Iowa City, wherever, and they commute into our communities for work. Next slide. So this is just one of the other things we did in 2018. We had Dr. Jerry Anthony from the University of Iowa Urban and Regional Planning came down and did a presentation. And so he gave us some slides, and this is one of them. And it shows that if you have 20% down, now I don't consider that a realistic number for most people unless you're moving up. But if you're starting out, if you happen to have 20% down at these income levels, you can afford those different house prices, and they range from $150,000 to $250,000 house. So you can see that you don't get much of a house. You can't afford a whole lot of a house until your income starts to get closer to between $60,000 and $80,000. That'll become important as we go on and talk about some of the housing costs in the community. So the next slide. We won't spend much time on this slide, but this kind of breaks down those numbers a little more. So if you have a housing price at these price points, 109, 150, then it gets down to what the salary you actually need. So a 109 with 20% down, you needed a $31,000 annual income. For the $250,000 house with 20% down, you needed about a $68,000 annual income. Next slide. However, I don't know many of us that know first-time home buyers that have 20% down. So I just did a little calculation using just the what's necessary for down payment if you do like an FHA insured mortgage. So you're paying principal and interest and mortgage insurance as well. So, and we used the same kind of numbers that with the monthly expenses in addition to your house, that would be an addition. So it might be a car payment or a small student loan and a small car payment. So the expenses are minimal, the down payment is more realistic, but everything else, then I used I did an example for Muscatine County median income and the city of Muscatine median income, because they're the high and the low. So at Muscatine County median income, you could buy a house at $195,000. At the city of Muscatine's, you could afford a house at about $160,000. The next slide, please. So That would be great if you could actually find a house that costs that much money. So if you look, this actually, we pulled these from Realtor.com effective last Friday, and you can see there were 36 houses for sale in the county, the whole county. And that is actually up. The week before that, it was actually 28. And the week before that, it was 23. So we're in a boom right now. But as you can see, there were 3 homes in the entire county that fit in that price range. And that's important because if you look, if you look at how people are purchasing homes, if you can afford $160,000 or $190,000 home, but you can't find one, then best case scenario, you're competing with the families that are looking for the $70,000 to $150,000 home. So it kind of has a downward pressure in terms of that, because if you can only afford $160,000, you're not going to go buy a $200,000 to $250,000 home. So anyways, the next slide, please. So the other side of that is that, well, we can build homes. Well, you can't build homes for that price either. So this example actually doesn't include any land cost. It includes the average cost of building a home at $150 per square foot based on the National Association of Home Builders estimates at the average size house, or the average size home for the state of Iowa, which is atypical for a new construction home anyway. The new construction home would typically be upwards of 2,800 square feet. However, in this case, using those 2 factors, the price of that home would be about $232,000 to construct. Again, out of reach of both of those median income families. And so then that leads us to that aging housing stock we have. You might want to move into it. You might find a really cute house, but if it hasn't been maintained, you have to do some renovations likely. And so again, renovation still carries a pretty hefty price tag of about $150 per square foot. And I couldn't really get some specific details, but the typical project was estimated to range between $18,000 and $76,000. And that obviously that would vary a whole lot, and I didn't try to get any more specific. On the next slide, please. So that being said, there is an economic impact that results in a return on investment if we supported construction. Based on the National Association of Home Builders, if you build 100 single family homes, I'm not going to read this to you, but you do have a substantial ongoing economic impact. Not only do you have, so this is using 100 homes, not only do you have the immediate investment, but you have an ongoing investment both in the private market as well as in government revenue, more than $5 million a year between the 2 of them. And then if we talk about our aging housing stock again, you could do $1 million of rehab, and that would again result in about $1 million a year ongoing for every year those homes are occupied of additional income into the community. And the next slide. So all of that led us to some activity, not just us, but throughout the community. So Wilton Development Corporation has created a partnership with Rural Housing 360, and they're developing a whole city square block with a total of 9 homes that they'll be building. So the land is incorporated into that at no cost. They have some 0 down loans going on. And they've built 1 model home, and now they're in the process of building 3 more, again, with a total of 9 to be built overall. West Liberty is in the planning phases. They are more land constrained even than most of the rest of us. So they are battling that hurdle right now and are looking also at a partnership with Rural Housing 360. Muscatine, we've had a number of multifamily projects go. We've had two low-income housing tax credit properties constructed and 3 more in the pipeline. We had Arbor Commons, the conversion of Arbor Commons is the creation of a subdivision. And then we had Hershey Apartments, the conversion of commercial space into units. My apologies, 25 market rate units. So we've had some progress since the plans were done. And I believe that the plans actually supported, as well, both our plan and the Wilton plan supported that in public investment into projects, because all of our projects have TIF in it, as well as, and then obviously Wilton is putting a lot of resources into theirs. However, most recently then, that has led us to Ignite Vitality through Workforce Housing, the plan, and the event. And go to the next slide, please. So why create another plan? And I'm, again, not going to read these to you, but we have our top 10 list, which Charlotte actually went through at the event last week. But it shows that we have a need, and that the impact of housing on quality of life issues and the ability of our children to meet their educational needs are all really critical. The next slide. And so what is Ignite Vitality through Workforce Housing? The plan itself creates a structure, establishes goals, and offers strategies that could be used to address the housing need in our communities. And we have the mission to accelerate solutions so that all people who live and work in Muscatine County have access to affordable, achievable, quality local housing. Sorry for the typo. Next slide, please. And so this structure has a two-component structure, and that's, we have the Housing Council, which commits to act on behalf of the communities and entities they represent. And there's a full list of them, from jurisdictions to nonprofits to financial institutions. And then that group oversees the process of establishing action teams, evaluating strategies for success. And then the action teams are actually the organizations that contribute to or work on specific areas of housing and would implement those strategies, as well as collect the data and provide feedback to the Housing Council. In the next slide. And so there are some big picture goals. Those big picture goals include encouraging development and supporting quality of life and sustainable ownership, preserving long-term affordability, increasing the inventory of quality affordable housing. And but most importantly, it gets to that quality of life. If people can find affordable housing, they can engage in the economy of the community. They can engage in the social activity of the community and the civic activity of the community. So through housing, we're looking at developing economic vitality and improved health outcomes. If you're stably housed, you can both meet your health needs through cost, as well as having quality housing ensures a healthy living environment. And then enhanced educational attainment. For children who move, children on free and reduced lunch move many more times than children who are not on free and reduced lunch. And so every time they move, it not only impacts their ability to achieve academically, it affects every child in the classroom they go into, their ability to achieve adequately. So all of those things are important to our long-term success. And the next slide. So, but the important part, the measurable part, not the important part, the measurable part, the numerical goals. So we want to improve rental inspections, the quality of housing by 5%. And while we hope these are realistic, but not so easy that they just happen without some directed attention. We want to increase the ratio of those who live and work in Muscatine County by 3%. We want to increase housing supply by 300 units in the incorporated townships. We want to reduce the number of children having to move within the school district by 50% when that move is the result of housing instability. We want to upgrade 300 units of affordable housing stock, and we want to decrease the number of housing burdened residents by 9%. So the next slide, please. So the big part, pick and choose your strategies. There are 5 pages of strategies. It is a laundry list. It was intended to be so. There are people who are already working on certain strategies that are listed. There are other strategies that need some work. So on this, I didn't obviously include 5 pages, but on this list of examples that I gave you, one of them is the creation of a land bank. We could create a land bank as a community. There would be ways to do that. However, there are also ways that a jurisdiction could do that. If the city wanted to hold a land bank, then we would, Mark Lofgren has actually introduced legislation that would authorize cities to have a land bank. Right now, the city couldn't do that on its own. Creating a tool shed, that might be something that's overseen by a church. Something that there has been some activity on is funding a community grant writer so that we can pursue other resources that would support the activities we're talking about. The city of Muscatine and the Community Foundation have both committed funds to that process for this coming year. Another opportunity, and I'm going to talk a lot about money just because money is important. As you saw, there's a mismatch between the ability to afford housing at normal wages and the ability to create housing at normal wages. So we're going to have to talk about subsidizing and or building, subsidizing construction, however you kind of look at that. And I think that all of the activities the jurisdictions have undertaken reflects that reality. So one of the other strategies that's listed in there is a revolving loan fund. A revolving loan fund is an opportunity to create resources that are ongoing, so you can assist this project, and while then the structure creates an incoming pool that just keeps replenishing itself. And the Community Foundation has actually committed to funding a revolving loan fund with partnerships from the jurisdictions. Some other opportunities are really much simpler. Some of them are not. Some of them are money related in the terms you have to fund them, like probably updating a county-wide housing plan or creating a county-wide housing plan would be important to give us a new baseline. Things have changed, not only with COVID, but also just because it's been almost 4 years now, and we have hopefully good new census data coming out. And so that information would tell us really what is the baseline where we're starting at from now, rather than from 4 years ago with ACS data. We could create employer-assisted housing that serves a range of different employers or a specific employer. There are examples of that out there. And I guess I will stop kind of going through all of that unless there are questions about specific strategies that were listed in there. And I will just go to the next slide, Kevin, and remind everybody that when we're discussing this, we still have those 3 answers we need. And I don't know if shakes of the head really work on that well on GoToMeeting, but that's what I'd call it if we were in person. So I can see Kelsey shaking, so it must work okay. So again, the questions are, is there support of the proposed goals and strategies outlined in the housing report? Are there, would the various governing bodies consider adopting a resolution in support of the plan? And what strategies might those governing bodies want to kind of just be involved in, I guess. So I'd answer any questions.
Well, I'll pipe in since it's so quiet. Jody, thank you for the presentation. That was great. I had kind of an emergency come up the other day, and I was not able to attend the event, so I was glad to have go through this. And as I was nodding my head, I was saying yes. I individually would agree to pushing those things forward. I think that it's important in our community, and I would have no objection to that.
Anyone else? It might be that folks might want to wait until they're back in their own individual groups to talk about the process for working through those 3 questions, or tonight, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
I guess I would ask for at least if there is a desire to have us come and have, if people are more comfortable doing it in their own governing bodies, do they want us to come and have that conversation?
Jody, this is Peg Gordon. I think that would be wise because you've got so many people here that breaking in into smaller groups and bringing back a consolidated view probably would be a little better. Okay. That would be appreciated if you could do that.
You guys get me regardless.
They might feel, I think a good process might be for them to have an opportunity to talk about it in their own groups. And then you could stop in at a later date and answer questions or something like that. Give everybody an opportunity. It is kind of clunky for us to come to any kind of decision making tonight.
Jody, this is John. I have a question for you. I could have easily missed the email, but I wondered if you could forward to everyone in the group the presentation that you did in addition to the, I have the attachment from Cinda on your presentation, but you have a lot of very pertinent and good information that you presented, and I'd like to have that sent to me if you would, please.
That's fine.
Okay. I don't know about anybody else, but I thought it was interesting. I'd like to review it more. Thanks.
Same here, Jody. Thank you.
Okay. I guess,
You could probably,
infos?
you could probably just send it to the chairs or Nancy, Lisa, and Carol, and they could get it out to their groups.
I will send it to Carol for dissemination.
There you go. If everybody's comfortable with moving on, we'll go ahead and do that unless anybody had any final thoughts or questions for Jody. Thank you, Jody. We really appreciate the information. I know it was a lot for everybody to digest, and some of us who went last week have already been able to put some of it through our minds, but this added a few details. So I think it's really good information for us to move forward with collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we are going to have an update on development at the Deep Lake Parks and the possibility of expanding city services to the park. Kurt, are you going to start us off with that?
Sure, I could do that. Just a quick background, the Deep Lakes Park, located about a mile south of Muscatine down on the island, was a piece of ground, 435 acres, that was donated to the county by W.G. Block back in 2012, early 2013. It was open to the public as a new county park in 2013 in the spring. We had planning sessions done on it to come up with an initial master plan. What are some of the activities we should be offering down there? And a lot of it is built around the 120 acres of crystal clear water that is located on that park in 20 bodies of water, the largest being 51 acres in size. So of course we looked at fishing, boating opportunities, now not motor boating, but canoeing, kayaking. People can put their large boats in, but it's trolling motor only, and that's by state code. Swimming beach, which was never offered in Muscatine County before, and we opened it about 3 years ago. It's a free swimming area. We have restrooms down there, 2 boat ramps. The city trail comes from Kent Stein Park all the way down, separated from the road down into Deep Lakes Park, which has been really heavily used since that's been constructed. And then we've also then hired an engineering firm to look into 2 of the other possibilities that go in there that we see needs for in the county as well as statewide, and that is more campgrounds and rental cabins. And so we had an engineering firm look into that. What they come with the campground was that we could easily put in 50 to 75 site campground. Essentially what's really in demand now is full hookup. So that means sewer, water, electric run to each site. Now that the baby boomers are retiring, they're buying big camping units and they're getting into camping. And we see that in the campgrounds all across the state of Iowa, as well as other states, that income on camping and the need for more campgrounds is growing. The other thing is rental cabins. Not everybody has a camper to go, so they're looking at getting a cabin so they can rent it. And so we had studies done on that and the need and the placements that we could put those cabins in. We're in the process now, and hopefully by the end of April, we will be opening up our first 4 rental cabins to the public to rent. These were part of the CAT grant with the city projects, and this was a county project for the cabins. It's right around $1 million that we'll have in those. Now, these are not primitive cabins. These are deluxe cabins, I guess you want to say. It's just like all the luxuries at home that you would have. It's, air, heat, they're 1 and 2 bedroom cabins. They would have all indoor plumbing and all that. So that seems to be from all the surveys across the state. That's what people want. They don't want these camper cabins that they have to go out of their cabin at night to find the bathroom that's down the way. They want everything in there and very modern. So those should be coming online by the end of April. And our next goal then to look at other developments down there, and we've been getting a lot of requests, is when is this campground going to go in? When we had the initial study done for the campground, we had the engineering firm look at wastewater. What would we do with the waste? And they showed a way that septic systems could be built down there, a large enough system for 75 site campground. Or they also brought up the possibility of connecting to city sewer and city water, and gave us the estimated cost on those. Their concern with a septic system, and it became a concern of the conservation board, is they said that, you know, all that stuff's going into the ground, into the sand, which we have 150-foot deep sand down there that goes down to our groundwater. You know, once it goes in there, we don't really know where all of it goes. And their concern was that by the time you would find out that your septic system could be failing, it could be too late, and you already have stuff into your lakes, which those are the pride of this park, is these lakes that you could see. Right now, you could easily see 10 to 12 foot deep down in the water, which you're not going to find that many places in Iowa that you could see that. And so we do not want to see something happen to those lakes and regret it in the future. And so I think that's why we're kind of here to talk about, is there a way to get city sewer down there? And also city water would be nice too, but city sewer, so we're not throwing all of our waste into the ground, into the sand that could get down into not only the lakes, but also into the groundwater on the island. I think that kind of sums up what I've got. If people want some more information on Deep Lakes Park, if you're not familiar, you could get on our website, muscatinecountyconservation.com, and look up areas, parks, and look up Deep Lakes Park. And there's a map on there that you could download that'll show all the locations of all of our features that we have right now, the beach, the boat ramps, and parking lots, and those sorts of things, as well as showing you where each of the lakes are, and you can take a walk and go explore.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I'm sorry I failed to introduce you properly, the Conservation Director, Kurt Weiss. Also, I wondered, Pat Lynch, the city engineer, and John Cook, our Water Pollution Control Plant Director, do either of you have anything that you'd like to add on this topic?
Thank you, Mayor. This is Pat Lynch, city engineer. We actually put together some slides to kind of go over this. Kevin, do you have those available? Great. If you could advance to the next slide. John and I sat down and talked through this briefly. And this is Deep Lakes here. The two red circles at the top indicate what we understand the potential locations for the campgrounds are. The circle in the center is the approximate location of the cabins, just to give everybody a rough idea where everything's at. Next slide. This is kind of an overview of the area. Deep Lakes Park is at the bottom right. The campgrounds would be the square, the rectangle square towards the middle on the right at the end of the blue line there, where the three lines come together. The blue line indicates a route that we could take the sewer from the campgrounds up to a lift station that we have at Dick Drake Way and Stewart Road. That one's about 6,500 feet, give or take a few feet. The yellow line indicates a path that would go from the campgrounds over to a force main that's already in that serves the industrial area down there. That's approximately 6,000 feet. And then the orangish color line that follow or kind of angles down and over to the industrial area, that goes to a gravity sewer down in the industrial area, and that's 15,000 feet away. Next slide, please. We through our discussions, we figured there were three options. One was leaving the septic systems as is. The second topic that we discussed, or option we discussed, was installing a lift station and making it a private connection to the city sewer. And then the last option we talked about was installing a city-owned lift station down there and having a city-owned and maintained force main up to the city system. Next slide, please. The septic systems, here's a list of concerns that we had with it. The main concern is it limits development. Is it currently working with what's down there right now? How do you sample for testing? They're looking at 75 campsites, and can that system serve that size of an addition to the system with all the environmental concerns that Kurt had mentioned? And the cost, that we didn't look at a cost for this one, so it's unknown. Next slide, please. And John, you can jump in anytime here to fill in. The second thing we looked at was the private or the county-owned lift station and a private sewer service to tie into the city system. This allows for more park development. However, there are only two entities that we serve outside the city limit right now. And everybody else, or the typical policy for the city right now, the policy for the city is to not serve outside the city limits. In general, we can't own facilities outside of city-owned right-of-way without easements and that type of thing as well. The cost for this system is approximately $1 to $2 million, depending on where in the park the lift station is placed. The soils out there don't lend themselves to boring, so typically you have to open trench through wet sand, which is slow and costs quite a bit of money. There are a number of entities outside of the city limits in that region that have requested to be connected to the sewer that we've declined at this point. We would need a billing or a private line agreement with the county, which could be tricky for billing, and if there were the other entities that have requested in the past would want to tie into this private line, we'd have to have a stacking and pre-treatment requirements as well, which kind of gets hairy. The city would need oversight on additional connections if the additional connections are requested. I think that covers that. John, do you have anything to add on the private installation?
No, just that there may be other parties interested. We included Monsanto, Bear, Camera Park, which is why we included the really long line of 15,000 feet that maybe have a cost share if there are other interested parties down in that area that might want to connect. And if they did go with that option, there are private companies that can take care of lift stations, sampling, sewer line maintenance, and all that kind of stuff as well. So there are some options for the private installation there.
All right, Kevin, next slide, please. The city owns and maintains it. This allows for expanded development in the park. this again is outside of the city practices and policies. The city typically doesn't own and maintain any facilities that are not in their right of ways without agreements and easements. So agreements and easements would be needed as well. Again, the cost for a city-owned and maintained lift station would be approximately the same price, $1 to $2 million, depending on where in the park it's placed. With the amount of flows that come from a park, the cabins and the campgrounds, there's really not enough flow to get a return on investment based off of sewer fees. So that would have to be discussed as well. There are maintenance challenges for lift stations with low flow. You have to continuously cycle the pumps. So we would have to send trucks down there, water trucks, to cycle the pumps depending on where they're at, or somehow get water to the lift station to flush them out, flush the lines out. And with this line being a little over 1.5 miles long, you're talking 3,000 to 4,000 gallons of water just to get the line initially flushed. So if you double that for each maintenance trip. Installation and maintenance costs would be pushed to the city ratepayers, essentially because of the low rate of return on the sewer fees. And then future maintenance and O&M costs are really hard to determine because of all the maintenance, the flushing maintenance needed throughout the future. John, did you have anything to add on this one?
Yeah, we'd be required to get easements along the entire route as well, which kind of would delay, and there's just an added cost and complexity to the issue when the city goes in and tries to obtain those easements.
All right, next slide, please. The cost estimate, the $1 to $2 million, that's based off of a sewer line cost of approximately $100 to $150 per foot. The lift station itself is $50,000 to $200,000, depending on the pump sizes needed and the requirements to push the 1.5 miles. That would be flushed out during design. More expensive for force main installed due to the larger pump requirements. There are a couple of railroad track crossings which cost money and time. The tapping of the force main, if we go in that direction, that is an additional cost as well. If the beach area was to be added, there would be another. If the lift station was placed up at the campgrounds, if the beach area and the cabins were added, then another lift station would be needed internally. And then again, the maintenance and O&M costs are difficult to determine for the rate of return on investment. Next slide.
That's all we had.
That's all we had? Okay, then I can open it up to any questions.
We just say we're not opposed to the idea. We just wanted to kind of point out all the issues that are going on, and that there are some things to consider.
Thank you, Pat and John, both. Questions, comments? Kelsey?
Yeah, so what I heard on there was there's 3 options, but none of them are very good. Which one do you guys recommend?
John,
I'll. Or is there some other? Is there some other option that hasn't been explored yet that would be, because I heard a lot of negatives in there, and so it's hard to kind of judge what direction I would want to lean on.
Yeah, we weren't trying to be downers on the whole project. We're just, when it comes to looking at how many things are there or options, those are the 3 places within the region that you could connect. So okay. That's kind of what we were pointing out, and then we were mainly kind of pointing out the obstacles that we'd have to overcome. Not that they're insurmountable or that they're not, that we don't, we're opposed. We're just kind of saying here's going to be some of the challenges that we have to address, and which one do you want, how much money do you want to spend, all that kind of stuff.
So on the options that would bring, because the city would be obviously very heavily involved if we're going to pipe that back to our treatment facility. what, you know, from your perspective, what would be the better option and what would have the least impact on the rest of our customer base for sewer?
Any of those options are equal. Sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Well, no problem. What I would say is what's the intent? Is the intent to just serve the park and expansion at the park, or is the intent to serve more than just the park? So that would be the driver there. Is what's the overall intent? What's the vision 20 years down the road? You know,
Okay.
instead of looking at just now, that would be a bigger driver of what gets put in down there.
And that makes sense. That's, you know, and that's kind of what I was getting at. I think that it would behoove us to look at options to find other customers, you know, that we would range, that we could connect to, but also not overwhelm our treatment facility. And I'll be honest, I haven't the slightest idea what our capacity is there, nor, you know, so I don't know what we could add that would be within reason. And if the total amount that we could add potentially would offset that cost issue a little bit better. So,
Santos, were you trying to? I'm sorry, Carol. I thought Santos was trying to get in. Go ahead, Carol.
I was just going to say, when we sat down and looked at this, we realized that there are some potential barriers, but I think if we wanted to pursue the idea, it might be good to have a smaller committee assembled to do a little bit more analysis on this. I don't think treatment capacity is an issue. It's more about the collection piece of it. And some of the issues that Pat has brought up, I think are ones that we would want to really be aware of if we were to pursue this project. Anything is possible, but I guess it's at what cost and at what risk is the question. And so we would want to do a little bit more work on it.
okay. Well, I would say I would definitely be interested in being involved in that. And I'm going to poke Jeff Sorensen a little bit just because of a conversation I had with him recently and suggest maybe he would want to be as well. But I'll let him say whether that's true or not.
I really appreciate the effort and the thoughts here, because I think that, you know, the island is a precious resource. That's all. We have a lot of activity down there. We have a lot of things going on. All the water for the city of Muscatine comes through. So that aquifer is very important to all of us and for the future of our community. And I think if we just take a good long look at this, I don't think there's anything emergency. I haven't heard Kurt say that he's still out fundraising for a lot of his initiatives, but I think if we keep it in our eye, you know, I know we had talked about a port down there and how would we service something like that and all of those issues. So I think a small group and looking at that, and I don't know how interested the city of Fruitland might be. I know you serve parts of Fruitland, I believe, off that 57th Street, but not the entire community. So I think there's just opportunities to look and see if it makes sense or not.
Oh, Jeff, the city water and sewer only goes to the Fruitland city line. The Fruitland itself has wells and septic tanks.
Yeah, I was aware they had a number of septic tanks because I think the county does a lot of the permitting and inspection on that. So yeah, good.
Santos, were you trying to say something?
I was, Your Honor. I was just going to mention that. Yeah, I would definitely echo what Carol had mentioned. I think that there's a lot of value in it, and Jeff's comments as well too. That we definitely think that it's a value added position. But I'm thinking about what Kurt had mentioned in regards to the potential of water being another need. I wonder if there'd be any value in at least once the route may be looked at. Maybe we could incorporate somebody from the MPW group, if seeing if there's any value, because if you start getting at the excavation cost when you hear the comment what Pat had mentioned, that it would need to be a full excavation versus a direct bore, then you might as well look at the cost of saying, is there value just putting a water line in there as well too? Just follow the distance what wastewater and potable water lines are. You could probably put that right in the excavation and save yourself a lot of funding if you're putting in water supply and wastewater, and you're not having to do, because a lot of your cost is your excavation, not your material.
Mm-hmm. And maybe communications too, if we're including MPW.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on that because you remember Director Durham talked about the big push for broadband to rural Iowa. And there may even be help for us if we have a vision like this to where we do that. And like Santos said, if you open up that ground, that's what's expensive. So you might as well lay everything you can think of in there because you only have to do that generally once.
Well, if everyone's comfortable, I think we'll go ahead and turn this over to Kurt and Pat and John to go ahead and gather a small group and take this a little bit further and explore and maybe get back to us.
All right, thank you.
Sounds good,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you all. Well, we're going to head into our very last thing on the agenda for tonight. We do have update on the levy improvement project. We all know that the levy impacts every one of our jurisdictions. So I think Rich Dwyer's going to kick it off.
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. Appreciate the time and the effort here to speak to everyone this evening. This is a project, I condensed the slides down considerably, but want to make sure we got everybody on the same page. But this started back in 2013. Basically, that's when the city did a study with the Army Corps of Engineers looking at how fast we would have to evacuate people off the island if we had a breach of the levee system. So that kind of got all of us to start talking. And this group and the city and county are both involved with this group that's on the slide here that helped us start doing some study work, doing fundings, and start to fundraise to look at a couple different studies that we incorporated. Next slide, please. So why are we even looking at this? One is from that study, but also when we look at our history, this is the historic crest in Muscatine, as long as they've been keeping track of these crests. And when you look at this list, all those in red, 80% of those ever seen on the Mississippi River in Muscatine has happened since the year 2000. 60% happened since the year 2010. And if you go a step further, 30% or 3 of them happened in the year 2019 by itself. So we see a lot more activity that's going on than we've ever seen in the past on the high levels of the river here at Muscatine. Next slide, please. So going back even further, looking at what the flood levels been, this looks at since the 1890s, how many flood events of the 46 highest flood events ever seen here in Muscatine. So in essence, the last 26 years that we've seen, there have been 27 flood events, a little over 1 per year. You go back the previous 111 years, there were 19 flood events that were in the top 46. As this slide, as you see, it's more and more events are happening each and every year as we go forward. So that's concerning right along with the inundation study that was completed. Next slide. So from that inundation, basically it told us doesn't matter where a issue would happen or a breach would happen on the levee, we would have anywhere from about 4 to 7 hours up to 200 hours to basically evacuate. It won't be much time to do much flood fighting at that point. As you imagine, when the water overtops, it's a sand levee, and that sand is going to just erode away really fast. And we're looking at, in a hole in that time frame, roughly about 15 feet of water on 30,000 acres. Obviously, that would be devastating across the whole community, the county, even in the state across the board. Next slide, please. And when we look at what's involved, pulled together the list of the businesses, including the city and the MPW and all, that had at least 15 employees or more. And there's roughly 49 people listed or companies listed on this slide. Those in purple are those that are within the city limits outlined by the purple line. The rest are outside in the county. In essence, of those 49 companies, there are about 4,000 employees are represented. So when we look at this, it's not only the employee component, but that's a big part, but we also have the water treatment facility that's in this protected area. And our water aquifer is coming from this area. If we were to have a breach The concern becomes what happens when that water treatment facility may get overflooded. Where does that water go? And then we got basically the aquifer and those pump stations all along there, as far as where they're drawing out the wells, they do have vents on them. They need to have vents in order to get the water pumped out. So there's concerns there as well about contamination. Not only as far as the total cost of all the repairs for all the businesses after a flood event would be devastating. Next slide, please. So this is the crux of the whole project that we've been working on since 2013 and through a couple different studies. First off, a study was completed in 2015 with Klinger and Associates, which is an engineering firm. It's the engineering firm that's done a lot of work on the Muscatine levee. They're also a firm that does a lot of the flood maps or the FEMA maps for the government. So with their help, and then following that in 2018, we did a study with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to try to see if we'd have federal monies to help cover for the full cost of the levee or a high portion of it. So what this slide is very complicated, but I'm going to simple it down for you a little bit. This red line right in the center is actually the Muscatine, Louisa County. So we are talking about two different counties that we're dealing with our levee improvement project. The black line is the actual design grade of what the levee is currently built, is the design grade that the Corps tells it to be at. After the 93 flood, the north end upriver is higher. That's where we went in and it upgraded to the 500-year flood plus 3 foot of freeboard. Now, just clarity, a 500-year flood does not mean that it's 1 year out of every 500 years we're going to get flooded. What it means is that every year we have a 1 in 500 chance of getting a flood event. From that point, it drops off right where you see the circle. It drops off and goes to 100-year flood level plus 3 feet of freeboard. The freeboard is allowed for wave action to happen. Now, what this also is shown is the blue line toward the bottom is the actual water line at the point it intersects with the black levee design grade, which is right here around that 150 mark. So that is saying that that's the low point, or what they call the incipient point of the levee. So if we ever have a potential flood, this helps basically the levee district really go in and flood fight at this point. And that's where we're going to spend all of our effort. So this helped when we did the core study, it helped us identify where that incipient spot is. So as we do this project, we're looking at the potential to moving the levee up from the drop off here where the circle is all the way to the county line to raise that up to that gray line. That gray line represents 100-year flood plus 4 feet of freeboard. So it gives us a little extra, but you look after the county line down in Louisa, that county shows that we're pretty close all the way along with that gray line. So it puts us in an even keel across the board. So that would be the first part of this. The Muscatine portion of the project would be to raise the levee roughly about a foot. One thing that takes a lot, but it does. That portion of the project is about $6.7 million job. Whenever you go up 1 foot, you got to go 5 feet out on the toe or the land side toe of the levee. So you're talking about a lot of sand yardage that you have to bring in, typically would be dredged from the Mississippi River, or you would have to truck it in, one or the other. Also with this project, the Corps of Engineers came up with the idea that one thing they do not want us to do is to pass our problem downriver or upriver or across the river. So we don't want to give our problems to other people. They want us to take care of our own issues. So the Corps would have to approve this as a 408 permit process. In order to approve that, we cannot have that impact on other communities or other sides of the river. Now, keep in mind, Illinois is at a 50-year plus 3 foot of freeboard. So they're already going to flood first, and it's already been designed for that many years ago. But what we're looking at here in the Louisa County portion, if you go clear down here, and each one of these lines is a river mile down here, but you go down to the very south end before you hit the bluff. Bluff comes down here at the very far right. You see a little red mark plus the box that shows up there. That is the other low spot of the levee that we would look at making a hardening structure, where you would basically concrete or some material that would solidify the sand levee. So you make basically a spillway. So when that rare time when the water would get high, you would automatically let the water flow over here, and it would fill up gradually, and you do not blow the levee. So you can manage the water controls in a such better way. And you look right next to it, the pump station sits at this high mark, so that's where the pump station is. So if the water comes over, it flows right into the pump station and pumps it right back in the river. Now, the pump stations will not keep up with all that water coming over, but it would gradually fill up the whole 30,000 acres, but at most, probably about 2 feet as opposed to the 15 to 18 feet of water previously with for each. So with that piece of the project, we're looking at about $5 million on the pump house, because we also look at those pumps that are there. There's 4 pumps, 2 electric, 1 natural gas, 1 diesel, because you want to have different fuel sources. But those pumps, the oldest one was put in the 30s. It still runs today. It still pumps a lot of water out, but yet you cannot buy any parts for the motor. So one of the things we want to look at doing is replacing that motor, and then all 4 pumps need to be refurbished to get the maximum capacity out of each. So that's about a $5 million project to do that component. We also, putting in this hardening structure is about 1.7 million. So we got about a $6.8 million project, 6.7 million here. So it's split between the 2 counties. Now we're talking about the dollars and cents wise. Muscatine County, we had an opportunity here about in December to file for an application with the Economic Development Administration's office out of Chicago for Muscatine County and the Denver office for the Louisa County. Because it's 2 different offices, 2 different counties, 2 different sources of funds. The Chicago office had extra dollars left in their budget, and we were able to put that application in. And we did receive notice back from the EDA that they fully intend to fund the 3.2 million of the $6.8 million project. We do have some things we have to jump through some hoops. First off, we have to do an archaeology study. That study was commissioned about a week ago controlled by Klinger Associates, our engineers, to get that ball rolling. We don't think there will be much archaeology found, but if there is, there's ways to manage that. We'd have to do a level 1, 2, and 3, and we can cart off or basically fence off just as long as we don't touch it. We don't think there's a high risk, but we'll have to find out what comes back. Once we have that completed, EDA will go to the full authority to move forward, and that's our next step that we're working on. Louisa County, we applied for a grant on the EDA, but we found out prior to applying for that EDA grant, they had ran out of their funding source. If you can imagine, after the 2019 flood, the amount of floods that happened in western Iowa was tremendous on those breaches of levees. So they spent a lot of those monies out in western Iowa and Nebraska and did not have any fundings left. So we continue to look. They do get some fundings each year. We may be able to grab about $1 million from EDA. We're also evaluating, looking at USDA as a funding source for additional funds. But the chances are probably not as much. But along with this whole project, the other component that was uncovered is that there's legislation had to be improved, because right now cities can do flood prevention projects with their obligation bonds. Counties cannot. There is no laws on the books that allows counties to use obligation bonds in order to flood prevent. They can do all sorts for the flood fighting or repairs. Cities can do it for prevention, but only within their city limits, I think within a mile of their city limits. So that left us with a struggle. So that being the case, with Jeff Sorensen, Santos, and a few others, we've been working on this for quite some time. We had a bill that was drafted, and that was presented about 2 months ago. The House side of the legislation ran that bill through the committee and also through the full House about 4 weeks ago, and it passed 93 to nothing. So it's very positive, non-confrontational, it worked out very well in our favor. As of today, Senator Lofgren ran the bill through the Committee of Local Government this morning and got full approval from the committee and passed across the board. So from there, it goes, I believe, probably next week to the full Senate. Once the full Senate gets approvals, at that point, it goes to the governors to be signed. So once she signed that bill, we can move forward with the finance and some other things as we move this project to at least to the next point. So with that, I'll wrap. Have any questions, or I'll let Jeff or Santos, any comments from you two?
Santos and Jeff, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Dan. I don't really think there is much to add. Rich, you did a great job as always. Thank you so much. And hopefully most people have heard about this project, or I know many of you have in different bits and pieces. School board friends, maybe this is the first time you've seen much on it, but it's been a long collaborative effort by a number of people, a lot of money invested, and we all have a lot at stake. So I appreciate everyone's support and efforts on this. And we just hope that the Senate brings it home for us this week.
Yep.
Thanks, Jeff. Santos?
Yeah, just echoing those comments. I think one of the biggest things that we look at beyond just reinforcing and hardening the spillway on the levee, as Rich had mentioned, was the fact that if you look at some of these pumps and you know what we had in 2019 and the amount of flooding we had in Muscatine, we really need to be focusing on this. And the cost, you know, when you talk about the millions of dollars, is a preventative measure versus a reactive measure if we were to completely flood the south end, or potentially looking at that whole island being underwater. So the cost is just something much more than what I think it would be really an effort that I'm glad that we're looking at this in a preventative measure and versus a reactive, which could be really detrimental to our city and county. Thank you, Rich, and thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other comments or questions for Rich or Jeff or Santos? Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody coming tonight. I hope everyone found it a good use of your time and very informative. I know I did. We look forward to having periodic meetings like this. And so as you go about your business in your own governmental body, please be considering what topics you think that might be interesting to all three groups together. And we'll look forward to having another one of these down the road. So thank you all so much for attending tonight. I appreciate all those who helped work to put this together. And I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening, and thank you again so much.
Hey, Rich, before you